Live. Hopefully this doesn't crash. Um. Okay. So. Hello, everyone. My name is I'm John of Johnson's Basement, and this is the fifth edition of Basement Talks, where I bring on people who I've met throughout my life and speak to them about issues that I'm interested or they're interested in, or uh, things of that nature. Some of it can be political, and some of it will probably not be political. I'm very much for any sort of types of conversation we're very much comfortable with here on this very invisible platform that I have. So my guest here, actually, I've known her for a couple of years now, and I feel like she would like to remain anonymous, but for now, I'm just calling her Banana. Uh, and so, Banana, if you would like to introduce yourself and, like, kind of, uh, anything you want to say about yourself before we kind of delve into the interview.
Ooh, sure. So, where to start? So, let's see. I consider myself someone who works in tech. I also really enjoy writing, so I always try to balance, I try to balance those two things whenever possible, because I feel like it's really important to have, a creative outlet at all times. And yeah, I really care about having diverse focus. I identify as being mixed race, so that's one thing that's certainly informed a lot of my perspectives. But yeah, I come from a really mixed household in terms of like race, religion. Also moved a lot growing up, so I've lived pretty much all over the U.S. I've also spent some time living abroad too. So yeah, I feel definitely very at home and comfortable in a lot of different environments based on my upbringing. And I'm trying to think what else. I guess similar, to you, I just enjoy having conversations with people about various topics, which I know sounds really general, but I really
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
like
yeah.
that's
Yeah, it can come off as a little obtuse sometimes. Like, ooh, various topics. Like, what
yeah,
are you implying there? You know?
yeah, exactly. Like, what is that even implying? But by that, I mean, I really like talking to people who are different from me. I think too many people um, just kind of spend time in their same like social circles with people with the same interests. And I think because of the background I mentioned, I really talking to people about various topics, especially if it's something I don't know a lot about. Like I'm interested to hear their perspectives on it too. So that's why I
Mm-hmm.
was really intrigued when you wanted to speak with me for this,
Yeah.
because I'm like, normally I'm the one listening, but it's cool to kind of share thoughts on various topics as well.
Yeah. And that's like about your background and like your upbringing. Can you just like delve in to a little bit of that because I know like you're mixed race, but but how what was your family life like growing up and like were you a lot more? I guess when you were growing up, were you a lot more serious or like were you class clown type of person, or like were you is it white being that sort of attention? Uh,
Yeah, that's a good question. So, yeah, so grew up mixed race, meaning my mother is from Japan, my dad is American Jewish. So, um, and also, my mom she wasn't someone who was Japanese and then moved here at a young age. She moved here as an adult. So
mm,
we grew up very conscious with someone who, was an immigrant here, but also with somebody who was like born and raised American too for my dad. So that was very interesting seeing both sides. In terms of how I was as a kid, frankly, it was really shaped by my environments I was in. So
yeah.
I'm the oldest. I have two little sisters. I was born in California, in Southern California, and that was really interesting because there was so much diversity there. There were a lot of different kinds of people. The weather's perfect in
Yeah.
LA. I know it's really hot now for various unfortunate reasons, but
Yeah.
at least growing up, it was a really wonderful childhood. And sometimes I feel like I kind of took it for granted because when I moved away, so we moved a few times when I was younger, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
We moved once when I was 7. We moved to France for a little bit, and we came back. And then when I was 12, we moved to Arizona. And Arizona, I struggled with because that was a place where there was, I just felt like I stood out so much compared to everyone else. Pretty much
Mm-hmm.
everyone was white in this town, and you know, not that that's like a horrible thing in and of itself,
Right, right,
but
right, right, right.
when you don't feel like you're accepted for who you are. So, and I also have always been I was a very extremely like studious and kind of serious kid growing up.
Yeah,
Always a teacher's pet. Um, Hopefully not too annoying about it.
yeah.
But yeah, I was obsessed with like I have to be the best student, I have to be quiet, I have to be obedient. I was obsessed with being a quote unquote good kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I really struggled with how do I express myself and not get made fun of, because it
Mm-hmm.
was already hard. Like, for example, I was really conscious of not trying to, like, fall into stereotypes. So, like, in math class, for example, when I was in Arizona in middle school, I was like, okay, I can't look like I'm too good at math because then people are going to make fun of me, and, like, perceive me a certain way because I'm, like, one of the only Asian kids around here.
Right.
So, feel like I was always very conscious of like how am I going to be perceived by others because at least during my very formative years I felt I really stood out physically, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I cared a lot about school as a goody two shoes. So that's just kind of a recipe for a lot of social anxiety.
Yeah. Was that sort of enforced by like your parents telling you like you have to do this thing, or your friends telling you you have to do this thing, or was this just informed by your consumption of whatever media you were consuming at the time, telling you, oh, I have to be, the quote Pokemon for a second. I know it sounds lame, uh, to be the best, the very best that no one ever was. Like what kind of influence that, like, that way of thought as a kid.
Yeah, well, I mean, one, there's several people in my family, including my father, in academia, who are professors. So for
Mm.
them, I think it's interesting how some people's families place an emphasis on status, or some people's families care most about money. For me, it was like intelligence was the biggest type of most valuable currency.
Yeah.
And so I think that just made me feel like, okay, I don't want to feel stupid compared to my dad who's brilliant, or,
No.
his professor friends who are, winning like the Fields Medal or like all these crazy things. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, I don't want to feel stupid. Not that
Yeah.
anyone ever made me feel stupid, but just yeah. So I think that just came from my environment, and frankly, I'm happy about that because frankly, my parents always kind of looked down on people who cared about money more than anything. Like if they had more money than intelligence, my parents would find that like pitiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of that kind of like in turn like that got um like planted a seed in me at a young age where I still value like intelligence so much more than I value money. Like I think
Yeah.
money is very important to be able to live in the world and function, but intelligence to me is an underrated currency. And
Yeah.
I think just my parents and like academic backgrounds, and then what else? I mean, frankly, just from feeling so different, I was like, well, if I don't feel different, I might as well just like work on school. um,
No, I actually, to relate to that a little bit, my parents were sort of, in sort of like, both of my parents, uh, were doctors, or are doctors still. They're kind of old now, but, and like when I was growing up, like, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, but, like, for a while, I always felt like, well, if I don't, do well in school, I'm gonna be in the shadow of my parents or whatever. Looking back at this, I knew this. In my opinion, this is a little stupid, but like, kind of like this feeling of like, oh, like I should never measure up to my dad or my mom who like have all this knowledge and like, went to med school and like pursued all this, um, uh, education, and basically have have the capacity to reason out, um, or this has a clear capacity to advance in a career like medicine that I actually never could, that I never could. But then I realized when I got a little older that, hey, look, maybe it was built a little bit differently, and that's okay. Um, not
That realization
yeah,
took me a long time. But yeah, it's okay to be built differently. But when you're young, that is your role model.
yeah,
Like I was just talking to some women now, and I was talking to a woman who is a designer, and she was saying her 3-year-old daughter was asked by someone else, "What do you want to do?" And her daughter was like, "I want to be a designer." And the mom, she told me, she's like, instead of being happy about that, I was actually kind of alarmed because I was like, wait, are you just not copying me as in like, oh, it's you can't do the same thing, but are you like, do you even realize that there's other options besides
mm-hmm.
mommy's career as a designer? You know? So yeah, it is crazy how influenced we are by our parents. You know?
Yeah. Well, I feel like if you respect your parents, they're very much influenced by them. I,
Yes, exactly.
and maybe that's sort of like uh that's sort of like a uh how should I say this? It's sort of a statement of how fortunate both of us are to grow up in households where our parents care about us, because not everyone has that opportunity, right? Um,
Yes,
some people's parents
exactly.
are really, really, really bad.
I frankly, I feel like have my own personal problems and issues. I don't. If I had a terrible childhood, I don't know. I don't know how I would be functioning today. Life is
Yeah.
hard enough without having good parents. Is hard enough. I'm not sure how I would function with having terrible parents.
Yeah. Um, but like, I guess like with that background though, I guess one of the reasons I was interested to speak with you was because like I know that talking with you had this very keen interest on like women's issues in particular, like how women are portrayed in society and like how women are sort of like uh in the world, you know. Like I feel like you're very much invested in that, and I wanted to just like, ask you like up front, like what sort of like made you interested in those issues to begin with? Like was it like a particular experience of like being in school or college or something, or like what was it like an evolution of time until like you became conscious about those types of issues, or um,
That's a great question. Yeah, it's so funny because I almost have the opposite response to that question. Is like, oh my gosh, I can't believe all women are not so particularly interested in
yeah,
advancing the cause of women. But right, not all women necessarily are for sure.
yeah,
I have to really think about that. Why do I care so much?
mm-hmm,
I think because so when I was little, my parents gave me lots of books about like the 100 greatest Americans, or lots of like history books. Again, because I was a nerd and didn't have a lot of
yeah.
friends.
So you're a boomer, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so big reader, and when I would read these books, I just noticed that like most of the great people written about were men.
Mm-hmm,
And I think again, this comes back to what I mentioned earlier. I always felt different from. I think I've always just felt different because it's like what people talk about with intersectionality, and I know that term can be thrown around a lot, but I think to
yeah,
me it really applies, which is I'm not just a woman, I'm also a mixed race woman, an Asian woman. Like I think I've just always been really keenly aware of how both of those things on how those things interact and how it's made me feel like different from other people. But I think for me, it really started to occur to me when I joined the workforce, definitely. But
mm,
it started in college. But yeah, maybe I'll talk about the workforce a little bit. When I
yeah,
noticed, I mean, I started out in executive recruiting before I even went into anything else, and I noticed why does so much of our Fortune 500, like, why is it led by a very specific demographic? Like why are there so few women or people of color like on leading major
Mm-hmm.
companies? And it's people like to say, well, I already feel myself getting heated about this topic.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead. They hear it.
Yeah, people like to say, oh, it's just like we just interview the best candidate for the job. We're not going to care about, the race of the person who gets this job. And I think that's like the right thing to do. But I think what people don't realize is that there's such a long pipeline that needs to be fixed in order to ensure like more like equity at the highest levels of a company. So I know I'm kind of going on a like tangent here, but
No,
all
that's
that to
fun.
say is like this. Yeah, I really realized this when I worked in executive recruiting. I just noticed there are so few women in senior roles at Fortune 500 companies. There's more than there were before, which is good. But typically, when you just picture like a classic Fortune 500 CEO in your mind, most people are gonna think of probably like a white guy who's wearing a suit and is maybe a certain height. Like there's even a term for that. I think it's called like 42 long. I think, which means like a
Oh.
guy with that measurement. Um, and again, that's not just referring to CEOs, but it's just a measurement for a certain type of guy who people kind of like associate with being in power. Even for me, like I hate admitting this, but when you just picture a stereotypical CEO, when I do it without thinking, I'll just picture some,
Mm-hmm.
just generic looking dude. Like I have to like consciously retrain my mind to think like, for like the one image of a woman to pop in, and I hate that. I absolutely hate that. So yeah, I think it occurred to me when I worked in that field and I just realized like so many discouraging trends. Another
Mm.
one too is that women on average take like in order to get the same role of like a CEO or a senior executive at a company, they on
Mm-hmm.
average have I think it was like 4 or 5 more years of work experience and more like grad school experience too to get there.
Right.
So when I saw those, and again, it is improving, and I don't want to discount that. It's
No.
just when I saw those stats, it was just like infuriating, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and not to mention, I think we just, to me, it's like we just get so used to the fact that there's not a lot of women running things in the world. I mean, imagine if there were, every president up until this point was a woman, and it was a big deal to have the first male president. Like imagine
Yeah.
living in that world. It's like it's just, it feels like striking, right? Like that how that disparity and yeah, I think we've just gotten so used to women not really having a lot of visibility and power that we forget how like
Mm-hmm.
really deeply um, unequal it is.
Yeah, I would say that I would agree with definitely a lot of that, but I feel like I would push back on this concept um that women haven't necessarily like over the past. I feel like we've taken for granted how much it's improved over the past 20 years. How much more visible this issue is, and how visible because of this visibility, people have been immensely trying to improve it. And I feel like a lot of the improvement has to just come uh, from primary school, from middle school, from elementary school, from early development of I think hey women in the STEM is that this project it hasn't. Some people may look at it and think like uh, it hasn't provided the dividends that they thought it was going to provide, but it's definitely um, um, yeah, it's definitely uh, it doesn't provide the dividends, but it's definitely a step forward, and it's kind of like a little um, uh, I think we just have to we sort of like take for granted like how far we've come in the past 20 years. I'm not sure if I'm explaining myself well, but
That makes sense.
yeah.
You know what? Frankly, I agree. And I think when I talk to older women, women who might be in like their 70s or so, I'm always reminded how much worse it was for them. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like they couldn't even like there's so many women that were not even allowed to be enroll at certain universities until the 1980s.
Yeah.
You know, and so when I think about that, I'm like, thank goodness I could go to college.
Yeah.
You know, I couldn't even do that. But yeah, I mean, like 100 little, you know, just
Yeah.
about 100 years ago, I mean, women couldn't even vote. You
Yeah.
know, so you're right. We have come a long way, and I don't want to take that
Yeah.
for granted. But yeah, there's definitely a part of me too where I'm like, oh, like I want to be grateful for this, but it sucks to have to be grateful for something that should be a standard. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, but yeah, I do kind of sometimes forget, or not forget, but maybe discount because I'm so eager to see better progress. And so I
Mm-hmm.
can sometimes feel frustrated, like, oh, we haven't come far enough, but not celebrating the things, how quickly things have changed. I think you're definitely right about that.
Yeah. I just like covering a little bit of the tangent to this though. So like, were you involved in any activism while you were in school? You went to Columbia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Were you involved in any activism on campus, or having knowledge of like activism on Columbia's campus? I'm just curious.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of activism on campus. I had many friends who would like sleep in the dean's office, you know, protesting certain things. There were always protests on campus. Like we always joke, like that's a normal fact of life. If there's a
Yeah.
protest, it means just like life is normal. So definitely with everything going on more recently at Columbia, that was I think to a next level. But even baseline though, there's just always a lot of protests at school.
Mm.
Um, I'm trying to remember. I might have done one or two protests, but I think when I attended school, when I got to college, I thought it was just going to be, oh, this is going to be an idyllic, you know, professorial vibe. We're going to be sitting on green lawns and reading books all the time. It didn't occur to me how much of an activist school it was, but I think it definitely like infiltrated my way of being. You know, like I like to. I wrote a lot for like school, like papers and school
Mm-hmm.
column and stuff like that about various issues. I think one area I became more vocal on was about mental health. I know that's less like political per se, but
Mm-hmm.
I became pretty vocal about that. The need for good like mental health policies in our
Mm-hmm.
school because I think a lot of people, especially in a really competitive university like that, are struggling and are afraid
Yeah.
to admit it.
Yeah. There's no. I mean, I guess at the time it was definitely not really an outlet to sort of vent their frustrations on. Like on this class where this can only pass like a certain number of students or whatever. Um, Because I'm sure a lot of the classes at Columbia were like that. That like, oh, like we can only have a certain number of students in this class A's, or whatever the curve was. And
Right.
and that was just um yeah, and that there wasn't really like a like an outlet to express that frustration, I guess. And maybe there is now, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't think there is. And it's like, have you heard that term? I think it's called like dock syndrome or something like that, like where you try to look cool on the surface, but really underneath, like the water, your legs are like kicking and like scrambling furiously. You know,
What was it called? I'm sorry.
it's something. It's like duck syndrome
Duck
or something like
syndrome.
that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's like it's duck. It's something related to a duck. I forget if it's a syndrome or like phenomenon or something, but it's the idea of like you try to look cool and composed, you know, above the surface, but beneath the surface, beneath the water, your legs are like frantically kicking, like trying to keep moving, you know, to
Yeah,
like
right.
look tranquil. So there's definitely a lot of that, and I think that's really informed a lot of the yeah the worldview I have, which is like I try really to help people bring out a side of empathy whenever possible. I try to be pretty open and transparent
Yeah,
however I can. Just because, yeah, I've spent my formative years in an extremely competitive environment.
yeah.
And, you know, once you're in that kind of environment, like, your college life kind of dictates a lot of things after. It dictates where you work. And then, you know, your first job dictates your next
Mm-hmm.
job, right? Like, it really does play a huge role in your life. Even though you're not in college forever, it shapes a lot of what comes after.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. if I looked at myself when I was like at the end of college versus like the end of high school, like I was a totally different person from when I was in like when I was coming through college and at the end of college versus like and then there were lots of it I didn't know and like, I had to learn. But definitely I was a much probably for the better, a much different person for have coming through college versus like um uh not I guess not coming through college and still being in high school. But I wanted to ask, what were your feelings? Do you know anything about I guess the Israel Palestine protests that occurred in Colombia? I guess like back in October, November, around like when uh, like how knowledgeable are you about that stuff?
You know what? About, oh, you mean what was going on specifically on
Yeah,
campus?
on the campus.
Yeah, what's funny is actually not a lot. And the reason I mentioned that is because, again, when I was a student, I mentioned that there were always protests going on.
Yeah,
And so at first, when I heard, okay, people are protesting, I just figured, like, okay, this is not out of the ordinary at all. Like, any major political event is going to have protests at any
yeah,
school, right? And I
mm-hmm.
saw it over and over again when I was there afterward. And so, and I also at the time, I've been spending a lot of time in the New York area, right? And so because maybe I saw it like in some New York paper, but I'm like, well, this is just local news, right?
Yeah, right.
About like what's going on in a specific school. And then when, I had a family member in Japan who asked about it, that's when I was like,
Oh
whoa, I
wow.
did not know the scope of this. Yeah, my grandma asked about it, and she's pretty old. Like, I don't think she even is familiar with the concept of like Brooklyn or Queens. So the fact that
Yeah,
she was aware of these protests at this school was really interesting to me. But yeah, it was interesting because under indexed how much of a global like spotlight was on them
mm-hmm.
because I'm just so, you know,
Yeah,
I also never want to assume that my personal sphere is like whatever the world cares about,
yeah,
because normally people don't care that much about one specific school. So yeah,
yeah.
it was opposite problem actually.
Yeah, so something that I've been struggling with recently is after a lot of the protests and a lot of the activity that's occurred online. I mean, I call myself, I was raised Jewish and I identify, I mean, I'm not religious, but I do identify with a lot of the plight of Jewish people. And like, I do identify with, I do think that there should be some home for Jewish people to exist. Um, these are opinions that aren't necessarily radical opinions, but the students are going around campus. Maybe some of them maliciously, some of them not maliciously, saying, "Hey, we want to basically come out and uh, basically end all these people's lives because they believe in these positions that we don't agree with." And honestly, it's kind of to be very honest with you, I've come out. Uh, I've been very hesitant of like introducing myself as, oh, I was raised Jewish. I'm a Jewish person because I don't know where they stand on this issue. I don't know where like um, it's kind of like screwed up my trust in people and like them trying to be understanding from where I'm coming from. So I just wanted to ask, like, does did this sort of situation make you worried at all about coming out as Jewish or not, or like how did it make you feel in that avenue?
Yeah, I completely understand that too. I mean, it's definitely there's a lot of I think for a long time I really struggled to understand the full scope and scale of it. There's a lot of anti-Semitism. There's
Yeah.
just so much anti-Semitism. Um, and back to our social progress kind of conversation a little while ago, like I want to believe that things are getting better, and I believe they are, but there's still like a lot of undeserved hatred toward Jewish people. It's interesting because I've never had anyone be like, wow, you're Jewish, right? Like, maybe, you know, just based on my appearance, because I think this is the case with most kind of mixed Asian people. The Asian features tend to be a bit more dominant,
Yeah.
so people just like don't seem to, people never kind of seem to.
Yeah, acknowledge it at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it is kind of an interesting thing being kind of like an like undercover almost. I don't know how
Yeah.
else to describe it, but yeah, I totally relate to that too, though. Like it does. I mean, I think it's really sad. I think it's really sad. I think that, you know, regardless of whatever you feel, like that can't tolerate just explicit, that can't allow for explicit
Yeah.
anti-Semitism, and
Yeah,
yeah,
it just kind of like made my brain kind of a little crazy because there are people online who say we have to kill Zionists, but I'm not even sure like these people know what a Zionist is. They just think Zionist is equivalent to like oh that means someone who wants to like that means someone who like wants to destroy Muslims or destroy the Palestinian state. That's not what that means at all. As much as I want to like get into it, I just had to ignore it because like it's if I engage with that with those types of people, I know I'm just gonna be fucking myself. Because like
right,
it's not gonna be serving of me to go out and like prove other people wrong who a lot of them are college students and probably don't know better. But what's even more scary is that it's not just college students; it's people in the mainstream who are probably our age who may believe some of these things. And that just like makes me very hesitant to even broach this topic at all. Um, but
yeah, definitely a very complex thing, and even within the Jewish community too, there's so much.
yeah,
There's a lot of different opinions, even within my own Jewish family, I know that there's a lot of different opinions too,
yeah,
So it's not even like Jews are like a monolith. There's a lot of like,
no, they are not. They're not a
yeah,
monolith.
especially within generations too. I've noticed actually some generational divides between older and younger American Jews at least.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely lots of like complexity around this topic. But I think like just anyone wishing for death, on either side. I mean, I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
So, um,
yeah. I
yeah,
feel like one thing that's kind of like made me go insane is like people who say like, oh, I mean, I personally want there to be a two-state solution. I feel like that should be a goal. But like don't, I don't, I don't tolerate terrorism of any kind, and especially that of Islamic terrorism. And that just seems so like somehow that's like an extremist opinion to have in some circles, and people will never take you seriously if you have that opinion. And that just makes me not even hopeful for any progress on in the discourse, whatever the fuck that even means anymore. You know, um, I yeah, I struggle with that a lot.
it is a it's a really difficult one. Yeah. I'm actually curious. I've talked with like a lot of Jewish friends about this. I haven't talked about it as much with like different people, like even in my own family. I'd be curious to get their opinions.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of tension. There's definitely a lot of tension around this,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's hard too because I know everyone says, "Oh, just read the facts or educate yourself," but it's hard because even certain articles can be like biased in the first place too. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely like I think important to educate oneself, but it's also even determining can I get an unbiased education can sometimes be hard in the first place
Yeah.
too, frankly. So yeah, definitely lots of like different, just so many levels of complexity with everything.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think yeah, maybe I'm happy I wasn't a student during this time. I know it was really difficult for a lot of students actually who for students during the protests because they also, if they were graduating around that time, they also entered during the time of COVID. So like
Yeah.
maybe their high school graduation was canceled, their college graduation was canceled. So definitely a very, very chaotic time.
But I think a lot of these protests occur, at least for the Israel Palestine ones, they occurred right after October 6th. Um, so that was relatively recently. Um, but I'm not sure if you're referring to something else. But um,
Yes, referring to that. But some college graduations were even canceled.
oh right, that's right. Yeah, because people
Yeah,
were like,
later on in the year.
yeah, because people were fucking sleeping on the roads and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know the full extent, and I also know like there are things I feel like I'm most privy to what went on at Columbia, but there's also at a lot of different schools. I think USC, UCLA, like lots of different things going on too. And like, look, I sympathize with students too. Like I was once one of those students too, and I feel like when you know I understand like the need for activism, but yeah, I just
It's very hard to reconcile with.
yeah, yeah, everything. There's so many layers to it.
That's a very terrible my terrible interpretation of my frustrations with it. I mean, obviously, I'm a bit more. Uh, I mean, I reacted a bit more. Uh, what's the word? A bit more violently. To like when after seeing a lot of those protests, and like a lot of those students who said those things. But that's why I don't when introducing myself to people. I don't mention. Oh yeah, I'm Jewish like at all. I mean, if they're ever Jews, yeah, I will. But like,
Right.
I sort of I just have to maintain this identity of I'm an unassuming white guy, with a funny little accent, because of my uh, cancer issues. So, um, but yeah, it's a bit. I'm glad to hear that you have some sort of reservations around this because I feel like a lot of people um, they just kind of say like whatever is like on social media and like they just kind of take their favorite streamer and just copy paste their opinions and they're my opinions now. So
Right.
I appreciate you having some reservations in this conversation. Also I don't know if a lot of people do.
Yeah, I'm just trying to come to my own conclusions. But yeah, I know it's hard. It's a very, very emotionally loaded
Yeah.
topic. There's a lot of suffering, on both sides, which I don't want to deny. So yeah, yeah, it's been a process for me too, kind of sorting out like, okay, what
Yeah.
do I think versus what is the media saying versus what are other people saying, what's in vogue to kind of say, just focusing on like what matters with my values and what I think is, I mean, not that what I think is right or wrong, like matters more than anyone else's thoughts on
Yeah.
this, but just coming to my own conclusions rather. Um, when I was younger, I feel like I would just again just go off what other people
Yeah. Copy
what other
paste. Yeah.
people say.
Hey mom. Hey. Can you copy your homework? Yeah. That sort of thing. But no. I hopefully you're coming to you're learning more as time goes on, and you have hopefully for all of us we have more well-rounded perspectives on it, so we can have healthier conversations around it. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I actually wanted to pivot slightly back into like the how women are sort of seen in society. I know like a lot of that was influenced, as you were telling me, by like this strive for women to that they were frustrated with women not being represented in the workplace. But
Right.
I'm just curious, like, was some of that also? Did you also have some of that where it was like kind of influenced by like how people perceive you physically and not like perceiving what you are as a person. Because I know like a lot of people or a lot of women, they complain that, oh well, uh, my issue is that a lot of people just sort of objectify me for being a woman and having these expectations of like looking a certain way. And I'm just curious if that sort of applied the same to you or not.
Oh, that's a good question. It's funny because for a long time, I really struggled to feel confident in myself and my looks because it did not look like the people around me in my formative years.
Really?
Especially again being in this town with like not a lot of mixed race or Asian people or just anyone who maybe wasn't
Yeah.
blonde. So for most of my life, in fact, like my brain is almost wired to not like I don't know to feel kind of like I didn't conform to social norms. And then it was interesting because, as I mentioned, I moved to a lot of different places. At Columbia, there were all different types of people of all different ethnicities. And suddenly it was like, oh, like people, you know, like it can be normal to be a mixed race person. And that was really
Yeah.
interesting too because then I learned about the other like opposite side of things where it's like, wait, there's a lot of Asian women who get like fetishized in, weird ways for being Asian. And then it was interesting. I was like, wait, what? Like,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm just gonna cough 1 second.
Yeah. Sure. Mm-hmm.
I was like, wait, this is like the complete opposite of like where, I grew up, where it's like you're like invisible,
Yeah. This is the other extreme.
Yeah, the other extreme. So I was just, I feel like not a lot of people have that perspective of what it's like to live in like two really like wildly different like ethnic like places with like different ethnic makeups.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was hard to me because I was like, okay, I've gone from like feeling like I don't fit in most of my life to all of a sudden feeling like normal, for my appearance now. This is very weird.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I'll say that if it helps anything, I've up until very recently, probably it took me here to realize this, but I've also had in my younger formative years, I had a lot of issues with like self image and like how I looked to people. And like, if I was portraying myself in the right way, it's like, oh, women don't like me because I look a certain way. Like in my 20s and stuff, like that's sort of like the part of it. I know that wasn't really true, but like that was part of the mentality that was like shaped
right.
in my mind for a little bit. And I had to sort of kind of teach myself like, hey, that's not true. Like, um,
Yeah, it's hard to change that though, because like our brains are wired like how we are when we're a child. It takes conscious work to like change that,
mm-hmm.
because we're wired like for the way, I feel like being adult is about being conscious, but being conscious takes a lot of work.
Yeah, there's a
you
lot of
know?
brain power that a lot of people don't want to use.
Yes, so much brain power. So I always think to myself, huh, if I had been raised somewhere where maybe the standards of beauty were kind of more similar to how I was, maybe I don't know, would I be a different person? You know?
Yeah,
So yeah, I think standards of beauty I think they have an impact on everybody, obviously, but particularly like for young women, of course, they have like an outsized impact.
yeah,
So, anyways, but yeah, I've kind of struggled with this before though, because all of a sudden I feel like if you're a woman and you're friendly and you're competent, like people start to like assume things about you all of a sudden,
yeah.
or they assume you can't be smart, for example, too. That was
Oh
like
yeah,
another strange thing because I was growing up and I was always known as this like Asian nerd, and then
yeah,
all of a sudden, for my whether working in tech or whatever, like people all of a sudden assume maybe I'm like not smart or something, and I'm like, wait, what? I don't think like hopefully not a lot of people think that, but I know some people probably do on the basis of physical appearance alone. So that's always been a very strange thing to me
mm-hmm.
too. Um, yeah, just the issues I think that like I feel like women have to think so hard about like how they present themselves physically, and not that guys don't. I think guys have to like care about that a lot too,
No,
but
of
I think
course.
it's really hard for people. Sometimes I feel like guys, it's almost crazy to realize like how much like not just how much goes into a woman's appearance, but like how much we think about it. You know,
Right,
like
yeah.
if I wear this, am I gonna look? People are men gonna think I'm a certain way, or
There's a whole the whole fashion business is literally just that is if I wear this thing, what will the people I'm trying to attract think about me? You know?
well, there's actually a funny thing about like when women dress for women versus when women dress for men. Like it is very very funny. Or these all these funny memes about like what guys think quote unquote natural makeup is, and it's actually a huge amount of makeup.
This is unnatural.
Yeah, it's actually unnatural, but guys are like, wow, she's like a natural beauty, and it's like, do you
I said, no, I
understand?
look like a clown right now. Stop it.
So it is very very funny. It's also expensive just like being a woman, and like I don't even spend that. I spend far less time on like a beauty routine than so many other women I know, and I feel like I still spend a lot of time. It's like okay, whether it's getting your hair colored or your nails done or this or that, you know. There's
Yeah.
this is a little bit different, but there's a famous Dolly Parton quote that says, you know, it costs a lot of money to look this cheap. And
I'll think about that when going forward. That's a good quote.
yeah, yeah, I'm not trying to look cheap by any means, but yeah, I think women, I just think in general, women have to think about their appearance a lot more than guys do. Although everyone thinks about it to some degree. I
No.
don't know. Would you disagree with that?
Disagree that women have to. I feel like women. I think there's more. There are more physical. Like. Attributes that women have to think about probably, and like I know that um, especially during puberty, it's probably I know like I've watched videos and read articles online that um of women just like not like they go through puberty and then like all of a sudden like they basically garner all this new attention that they didn't ask for, um
Mm,
and because they look a certain way where like they may not want all that attention because that's not
right.
the type of person that they are. They don't want to be like they don't want to be a model. They just want to be in their own little world because they're frankly as when women boys and girls are going through puberty they're children, right? So like
Yeah.
um, even until the age of 18, 19, 20, like they're still, in my mind, they're still children. But I feel like there's a lot more physical. There's some argue that there are more because women have some more physical changes in puberty than boys do. Um, I mean, boys develop like facial hair and stuff, but like that's not necessarily a thing to be necessarily self conscious about. I mean, as someone can be self conscious about it, but um,
Oh, interesting.
yeah.
Interesting.
There's like I know like when I was when I was going through puberty, I didn't really care so much about like the facial hair and like all this other like features, but like what kind of made me sort of upset was because I was in choir for many years and I I I was a soprano. I was in trouble for many years, and then I hit, you know, I think I had turned almost 14 years old, coming into ninth grade, and like I stopped being able to sing,
Oh,
sing those notes because my voice was changing. So it was like, oh no, what's happening? So
whoa.
yeah,
Yeah, it would be very interesting to experience, for me to just experience puberty as a guy, because that's gotta be crazy. There's so many hormonal changes. Your voice is dropping. You know,
yeah.
people always say, "Oh, you know, did your voice crack a lot during puberty?" Doesn't that happen to everybody?
Yeah, I think I might have. Definitely during singing, while singing, definitely cracked a
Sure.
lot. But I've definitely been ridiculed about it quite a few times. But like my speaking voice, I don't know. But I'm definitely self conscious about that a lot, and then not accepting the changes that have like come my way. And then as a kid, like this stuff is happening to your body, and you're like is the world coming to end? Like it's just like crazy going through like 12 to 13. Middle school was a rough time for everyone, and there's a reason why. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's the perfect age range to be, confused and sad. Yeah, that's kind of comforting to know.
Um, but yeah, so I have like a couple of more things on here about I feel like we've been talking about like a lot of serious stuff. I watched this video recently about uh uh are you familiar with like Ariana Grande and like that whole drama? I know you're into celebrity drama. Um
Totally. You mean with her husband and stuff?
yes.
Of course I am.
um So I that's like I saw a video from this one channel that sort of argued that that Ariana Grande sort of suffers from like the Disney princess syndrome, where she was like, oh, like I'm like fading like wanting to be saved, but then like now she's like in this new phase of like, oh, I'm a grown adult and like everything's changed and like I have my own opinions now, and even though that she's still apparently uh sleeping with other people's husbands. Uh, but I guess I was interested to see like what your thoughts were on that, and like kind of like where you stand on that whole debacle.
Ooh, yeah, I feel like debacle is the right word. I feel like I am so interested. Yeah, I definitely think celebrity gossip is fascinating. I've also learned though from I've also become a little bit more interested in like the PR process itself and how
Yeah,
celebrity gossip is covered. And what I've learned is that similar to like anything in the news, there's a lot of, misinformation even about celebrity gossip, which is
right. Yeah,
hilarious as well. So thinking about it, I'm like, I think the things that have been reported are accurate, but we don't know for sure.
yeah.
Frankly, we don't even know if like the baseline facts are true.
Mm.
So if it is true, I feel very bad for this guy's
Wife. Yeah.
with the child too.
The child. Yes.
Yeah, that's gotta be quite sad. Um, I also don't know Ariana Grande, so now I'm like, huh, I'm so curious. Like, what is her side of the story? Because lately, one that's gotten me interested. One thought experiment that's gotten me interested lately is thinking like, okay, if you could like be friends with these celebrities, what would they actually tell you about all these quote unquote scandals that they've been in? You know,
Yeah.
that would be fascinating. That would be very, very, very fascinating to know. Because like recently, in the past year, I feel like I've started to meet some more people just by chance who happen to be in the entertainment industry.
Oh, interesting. Would you be able to
Yeah.
reveal who they are?
Well, these are people who are like, they're not necessarily like celebrities, but they're people who like work with them. They might be on like the producing side or whatever. They're not like super famous people or anything. But I've
Okay.
asked them, I'm like, hey, you've gotten to work with these like celebrities. Like, what has it been like? And this guy I met recently who was, I think he's like on a production team or something. Or was on the producer side. He was saying like, you know, they're just people too, but what did he say? He said something really interesting. Some people are really similar to their public persona, some are not. I'm trying to think of like specific examples that he brought up. I can't remember specific examples. He gave one like really, really the name of like a famous like male actor. I can't remember who it wasn't like Tom Cruise or something. It was something like that. But he was like, yeah, that person is really different from their public persona. But
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly. But not sure why I think celebrity gossip is so interesting.
Well, I mean, to be fair, like I actually in recent past, I've actually followed a lot of streamer drama, and it's a very similar. Whereas like one person might say a bunch of shit on stream for clicks, and then might act totally differently off stream or like with fans or whatever. Uh, and then some people just like say a bunch of shit on the stream, and then they're the same as that person. Like when you meet them, and like nothing. It's the same sort of what you see is what you get. You know.
Exactly. But it's interesting too. There's lots of people who are very active and they'll post on LinkedIn 24/7. You meet them in person, they're super shy and quiet.
Oh, the LinkedIn whores who just
I'm like, wow, you're so loud on LinkedIn. Yeah, there's or yeah, so that's interesting to me. So yeah, I think in general people's like public personas are very different from their private personas. So I feel like lately I've been interested in not just what's the new like the celebrity story, but like, ooh, like I wonder how that person actually is like. But
yeah.
I'm happy I'm not famous because I could
Oh, I'm
not.
happy I'm not famous either. I don't think I can handle it. I'm so glad this channel never really took off. Or else I would have a lot of problems.
No, seriously though, like you know, in New York recently, I've seen a lot of famous people just walking around, and that's
Hmm.
really cool. But I was like, damn, like I'm taking note of the fact that, like, wow, I noticed that this actress walked by or that actor walked by, and I'm like, they don't even know who I am or that I exist. How
Hmm.
scary is that? There's random people who are like, oh yeah, I saw this famous. Like, how would it not make you paranoid every time you go outside that there's literally people watching you everywhere you go? Like, I don't know. I know a lot of people want to be famous, and when I was younger, I was like, oh, it would be so cool to be notable for something. But now that I think about it, I'm like, wow, that must be really invasive to like.
All right. So someone in the comments says, "I'm gonna cancel you for having glasses and with a moon face." Thank you, Odyssey. Someone who's been on my show before. Uh,
Oh,
yeah. I have a friend. But uh, but yeah. Um, but I feel like um, there is sort of like this thing about with actors and actresses of like they have to like balance like what uh a lot of the balancing act is kind of like part of their brand and like what like they want to sell to people. And like it's like really crazy like seeing like politics streamers in particular and them coming on stream and saying like, oh, Israel shouldn't exist or whatever, and like that being part of their brand is just so um I just find it to be so funny that I mean it's really sad, but like it is a little ironic that like a lot, especially in those spaces, in like politics streaming spaces, where like people will go up and say ridiculous shit, just to click some views, is like part of their brand.
I'm sure. I feel like that's almost part of it. It's like how you have to almost like drive virality, is by saying somewhat like ridiculous things sometimes. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it almost like pushes people to become more extreme so that they can get
Yeah.
more interaction.
They call it the echo chambers. Hello, echo chambers.
Little deco chambers.
Uh, um, but yeah, so I guess how long have we been streaming for? I don't even know. An hour. This has been streaming for a bit. I'm not sure how long it's been live for, but um, so there is one question that I have, or I have a couple of questions, but like um, one thing I wanted to ask is we've been talking about like a lot, some pretty dark stuff. But is there anything that makes you optimistic about the future and like in society in general? And whether it could really be anything. It could be in the news or not in the news or like trends that you're seeing or whatever? Or, I'm just curious.
Really good question. What makes me optimistic? I think I feel like I keep talking about the same things, but number one, like diversity in the media and representation makes me really happy. Like the fact that, you know, like Crazy Rich Asians, for example, which like I don't even think it's like that particularly great a movie, but it was still like a pretty groundbreaking movie. Like the fact that like those actors are like well known and respected, like to me that's very optimistic and exciting. Wow, I'm kind of embarrassed that I have to like really think hard about
No, it's okay. It's okay.
optimistic. I mean, there's things that I personally look forward to in my life. It's not maybe a world trend. I mean, I like the fact that travel has become more and more accessible to the ordinary person is
Mm-hmm.
exciting for me. Like I remember my dad telling me that even like when he was in college, in Pennsylvania, he was like, wow, it was considered like exotic to have a person from California, you know? Like
Mm.
it was really different back then. And I think we take for granted how easy it is to travel and explore the world right now, right? Like with my parents, like they would not have been able to. They did a long distance relationship from Japan to the United States. Like that wouldn't have for a little bit. Like that wouldn't have been
Mm.
possible, you know.
They did that probably in like the 70s or the 80s, where like it was real hard to do something like that. How do they even communicate? Like by homing pictures or something?
That's a good question. I mean, it certainly wasn't like obviously there was no like FaceTime or anything like that. Phone calls were there were phone calls, but obviously they were very
That's
expensive, you
right,
know.
especially overseas.
So yeah, exactly. Like my dad said, he lived in England for a bit. And he was like, yeah, my mom didn't call me because it was too expensive, at the time. Like there were that made it really hard. So that's one thing that makes me optimistic for the most part, which is how much more accessible it is to see the world. Now that doesn't, and I feel really lucky that in my life I've been able to travel a lot. Like that's my favorite thing in the whole world is being able to travel and see the world and go to places that you know like are kind of off the beaten path too.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously those are always going to be kind of expensive to get to, but yeah, that's something that gets me optimistic is the fact that more and more people are able to travel distances that maybe we would have never thought of going like 20 years ago. That's really cool to me.
Yeah. There's actually like a really interesting answer because like I feel like we definitely take like plane travel very much for granted because like I mean 100 or my mom's family in particular has been in like the East Coast area for a very very long time, and like I don't know if my mom was able to um uh yeah, I don't know if my mom actually traveled a bit when she was younger as well before being with my dad. Interestingly enough, and I'm not really sure, but I'm assuming that like the plane rides were like a lot less accessible because there are a lot fewer planes and like a lot fewer airports. So
Yeah, and a lot
uh,
more expensive. So much more expensive. Like now, you can go to Europe from the US. If you're lucky, you can find a cheap ticket for a few $100. I mean, that used to be like thousands of dollars. So,
mm,
yeah, it's funny you say that probably is an unconventional answer, but if I can see the world before I die and see maybe every continent, that would make me happy.
yeah, no, that's just a goal to have. I'm still trying to hit all 50 states, man. Like I went to Montana this summer for the first time.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I'm still trying to hit all 50 states. I haven't done that yet.
I haven't done that either. Never been to Alaska or Hawaii, which is funny because I'm a huge traveler. I
Yeah,
just recently went to Mexico for the first time, which is funny because it's so close to the U.S. But
mm-hmm.
yeah, I could talk about traveling 24/7. Like one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, no, I don't want to like dox you too much, so we'll talk about that some other time.
For
Um,
sure.
was there anything uh, there's a commenter who asked, can you ask her if people are eating cats and dogs in Ohio? Sorry, he's a little bit of a troll.
I know what that's referring to. That's
That,
very, very funny. Um, I hope not. Although, what's crazy is sometimes on the internet, I look up a bunch of random shit, and there are some like I love looking up I don't even want to call it strange, but like random foods that people eat around the world. There are lots of interesting foods that people eat around the world. Like some people have like I think it's like snake infused like alcohol. People
oh,
eat guinea pigs in I think it was like somewhere in South America. So there's like lots of interesting foods that people eat out there. I
yeah.
don't think people are eating cats and dogs
Yeah.
in Ohio, but there are some people all around the world. People are eating crazy shit,
Yeah.
and actually, one of your personal goals is like to try some of that crazy shit.
Well, I mean, I've heard from people that a lot of the crazy stuff just tastes like chicken. I don't know how true that is, but
It
uh,
is true. Alligator,
yes, alligator tastes like chicken.
yeah, alligator literally tastes like chicken. Yeah, I had an alligator sausage. It tasted like chicken. I like eating some other random food too. It'd be interesting to try more bugs too. You know, there's like
Nah, I don't think I can eat the bus, bro. I don't know if I can do it.
well, you don't eat the. There's like cricket flour that you can eat. Some
Oh
cricket.
no.
There's like cricket muffins. Yeah, my dad told me one time he was like a judge on like a cricket contest. So random.
Jesus.
Um,
Oh my god. I think I would vomit.
yeah, I know, right? But you probably wouldn't even know if you were eating a cricket. So, anyways, yeah, to answer the question, I don't know, hopefully not eating cats and dogs in Ohio, but people are eating all sorts of random shit in a perfectly normal way all around the world.
Yeah, that's very true. Does you want to does you want to I guess in closing, does you want to say anything or say anything to close out or like the uh does you want to ask anything like I wanted to flip the floor to you if you want to say anything additional. Um,
Ooh, I'll ask you a question,
yeah,
which is when you're talking to your guests, let me think about how to phrase this.
yeah, sure.
When What are the most exciting types of conversations you have with guests?
Yeah. So I can just give you a rundown of like what. So the first class that we had was a YouTube associate of mine who made political content. A Canadian guy who made politics foreign policy response videos. Um,
Yes, that's that. Yeah.
Yeah, and but he recently changed like a lot of his political opinions, so I was really interested in like how he came to those conclusions. He's a little bit of a zany guy. I don't think he's a bad person, but he's a little bit zany.
Sure.
But then like I actually interviewed my friend Odyssey, my IRL friend, and uh he's a college student actually, but he's in computer science. But he has this very keen fascination with like military equipment and like
Mm.
uh, artillery and stuff. So like we had a conversation about a lot of that. Um, and then I brought him another YouTube celebrity, or not celebrity, but like YouTube content creator in my space. Um, and we actually discuss all sorts of different topics there. Um, Politics, but also like a lot of video game stuff in that conversation.
Mm.
And then I invited my former coworker last time to talk about sort of like AI ethics issues. Um,
Ooh.
yeah. So that was a stream that I had to restart and
Oh.
yeah. That was
Yes.
probably one of my favorite conversations actually. Because it was really interesting hearing like an AI researcher guy like hear his opinions of like how uh, AI sort of uh, yeah has sort of like messed up our the perception of like what's real and what's not. Um,
Oh my god.
yeah. So, but I honestly, I'm just interested in like poking people's brains on like on topics that they find interesting. So like with you, like I know like you find a lot of these types of issues really interesting. And I feel like this is like a good way to sort of for me to like learn because like I'm kind of learning for every class that I have on because like um like I definitely have this problem where like I want to read more and like I've been trying to read more books and like more I've been trying to go to the library for example to like learn a bit to be more well read. But
Right.
I just realized that like I'm not gonna be the most well read person in the room, and I'm okay with that. But I found I personally found a lot of value in just asking people questions of like their perspectives, just because I know that in certain topics, people are just gonna be a lot more well read than I am, and I just feel like if someone's passionate about a range of topics or a certain topic, I'd love to just ask what their opinions are about that topic. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
It does. It does. I think that's so. I think it's wonderful that you just come to conversations with a genuine sense of curiosity.
yeah.
Like, there's a quote that I love that says, like, in order to be more interesting, be more interested.
Mmm.
You know?
That's very encouraging, actually.
Yeah. And I just think it's just really so wonderful that you actually, like, are very genuinely curious about people's perspectives. And if I can leave people with one thing, I would say this, which is never underestimate where random connections can take you. When I first started working with you, years ago, I couldn't have predicted, oh my gosh, we would be having this conversation
Yeah.
today in this context. But I think it is so cool. Um, I think it, yeah, I just think it's so cool. The way that certain connections you have with people can evolve,
Mm-hmm.
and you might have never, and it feels so normal later on to be like, oh yeah, I just met this person at work a few years ago, but like you can't predict. It's like it's still
Yeah.
pretty amazing, if you think about it later on. So yeah, I'm just really grateful for that, like original connection, work, and working with you, and then yeah, it's oh, okay. This is the actual like last thing I'll say. Speaking of
Yeah.
connections,
Yeah.
you simply never know. Like I have this one friend who I've known for a long time. I've known him since, we were in college together. He was really good friends with one of my friends. So I wasn't like super good friends with him, but I've stayed in touch with him. And because of, our mutual friend that we both know really well, I would see him a lot like over the last year, like 10 years basically.
Mm-hmm.
And what is so crazy is that I had a party like a few years ago and I invited a bunch of friends and I invited him there. And that at that party, everybody like made a card for me at the party, which was really sweet. And
Oh.
on the card, this friend wrote, he was, this guy, he was like, hey, something along the lines of like, I know we don't know each other super well, but it's been really cool how we've had like a bunch of crossovers with like a bunch of our friends knowing each other in common in random ways, and I'm excited for more crossovers like in world collisions in our lives. And what's so nuts is that day I invited a different one of my friends from like a different just a different like friend circle, and they met that day, and they got engaged like recently. Just from a chance encounter, you know?
Well, I mean, maybe it's just a wing woman in disguise. Who knew? I never. That this is something new I learned about you today. Is that you're a undisputed wing woman.
It's so funny. I told my friend, and he was like, "You should have a side hustle as a like matchmaker for people." I was like, "That could be hilarious. That would be a hilarious side hustle to have."
I feel like with your connections you'll be pretty successful. Like you know some CEOs, you know people like you can
That would be so funny.
do it
Oh
up,
my god.
bro. Like
Change. Yeah, hopefully they would be successful. But yeah, I've like actually set up like a few different couples. Now that I think of it, it's like a part of my life. But yeah, I think just you like just staying in touch with people. I think is so important because you never know what it's gonna lead to. As long as they're a good person, that's the
yeah.
only caveat. If they're a good person, you should stay in touch with them.
If you don't do shady shit,
Yeah,
don't burn the bridge if you don't have to.
exactly. Don't burn the bridge. So many people are just kind of like okay with letting people just kind of phase out of their lives. But for me, as I mentioned, having moved around a lot, I think I've gotten pretty good at staying in touch with people,
Yeah,
and I'm really, really grateful I have that skill.
for sure. I've had this sort of figure out that skill as well. Because like a lot of my personal friends don't live where I live. And
Right.
like and I've had to like I'm usually the one reaching out and keeping in touch with them, but like I know that there's people from all over the country. Like I've known a lot of these guys for like 10, 12 years, and I know that they're my friends for life, even though I don't see them. I don't see them very often, you know. Um,
Right.
so I'm sure it's like a very similar thing for you, where it's like, hey, like I have all these connections, but like you don't necessarily say like, oh yeah, they're not like Facebook friends, you know, like the people who have the same connections with. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
but
Exactly. It's like broader than like you just know them. It's just you have a genuine connection with them. That's
yeah,
what it is. You know. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of just having genuine connections with people, and especially with people you know you might not have originally predicted or expected to
yeah,
have a connection with. So yeah, I'm glad work, you know,
yeah,
helped me meet you, and I'm so grateful that I could be featured today. I
yeah.
feel so honored.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. But yeah, I think this will close the fifth edition of Basement Talks. There will be more content on the way, but I will be um out of town within a few weeks, so we'll see where that goes. So that's really all. So I guess it's time to say goodbye. We'll see you next time.